There are several ways of getting to Tower Hill. You can take the bus, you can take the train to Fenchurch Street, you can take the DLR to Tower Gateway. Heck, if you're watching this video, it's even possible that you'd take the tube. But there's one form of transport you won't be using. I'm talking about the Tower Subway. By the second half of the 19th century, London was badly in need of a new river crossing. The West End was fine for bridges, but there was nothing east of London Bridge. The big problem was that at this time the Port of London was at its height. The river was crammed from shore to shore with ships, boats and lighters, all of which needed access to the city. A new bridge just wasn't an option, unless you could somehow build a bridge that ships could pass through. But there was another solution. If you couldn't go over the river, why not go under it? The Thames Tunnel, opened in 1843, had proven that it could be done. So the Tower Subway was planned. It would be dug using the shield patented by James Henry Greathead, who, as far as I'm aware, never described himself as having a great head for inventing things, but perhaps he should have done. Digging began in February 1869 and took just 14 weeks. Pretty impressive, given that the Thames Tunnel had taken 18 years. The tunnel was finally completed in December of that year, and so finally, the EastEnders got their river crossing. The tunnel contained a narrow gauge railway, which technically speaking makes the subway the first deep-level tube in London. This contained a single carriage referred to as an omnibus, which was hauled along on cables wound by stationary steam engines. Here's a picture of the inside of the carriage, which is either being absurdly optimistic about the amount of space available, or is evidence of severe malnutrition at all levels of Victorian society. Put it this way, Charles Dickens Jr., son of the more famous Charles Dickens, later described the tunnel as follows. There is not much headroom left, and it is not advisable for any but the very briefest of Her Majesty's lieges to attempt the passage in high-heeled boots, or with a hat to which he attaches any particular value. Fares were a penny. Weirdly, even though there was only one carriage on the entire line, it was also possible to get first-class tickets for twopence, although in practice all this meant was that you could jump the queue. I don't know, queue jumping. It's just not the British way. Sadly, the Tower Subway was not the roaring success its promoters hoped for. The man who had first proposed the tunnel, Peter Barlow, had hoped that it would be the start of a whole network of deep-level tubes, and it's tempting to imagine an alternate reality where the Tower Subway is on the tube map. But sadly, it was not to be. Within a year, the railway closed. The lifts down to the tunnel were replaced with a staircase, the rails were lifted, and the whole thing was turned into a pedestrian subway, charging a halfpenny toll. And it did okay, at first. It wasn't much, but it was the only way across the river. What were you going to do, walk to London Bridge? Oh, right. That thing. In 1894, Tower Bridge opened. Being a short distance from the tower, free to cross, and not a tiny gaslit tunnel, it was a much more popular means of getting across the river. In 1898, the subway closed altogether and was sold to the London Hydraulic Power Company. Water and hydraulic mains were laid through the old tunnel, and it still carries water mains to this day. Little was left to mark the entrances apart from a couple of small kiosks. So ended the sad tale of the Tower Subway. You can still see the site of the subway entrances on the north bank and the south bank of the Thames. In a sense, yes, it was a failure. But by the time the foot tunnel closed, the City and South London Railway had made a go of the concept of deep-level tube railways, and it would soon be followed by several others over the coming years. So maybe the Tower Subway wasn't such a white elephant. Maybe it was just an idea ahead of its time. Hi all, hope you enjoyed that low-down episode of Tales from the Tube. If you did, then why not consider hitting that like button, although obviously that's your choice, don't feel pressured. If you want to see more, hit subscribe, and hopefully I'll see you again next time. Cheerio!